Welcome to Tenacity with Sonia C, the podcast for founders, entrepreneurs, dreamers, and leaders navigating the journey of growth. In each episode, we get into the setbacks, the rebuilds, the pivots, and the lessons learned along the way. These are honest conversations with leaders who face challenges head on and found success in business and in life. I'm your host, Sonia, and let's get started. My guest today is Ian Noble. Ian spent 14 years building a dry cleaning business in Austin that grew to over 14 locations and over 90 employees before he exited in 2023. Along the way, he was also quietly investing in real estate, which shaped how he thought about risk, freedom, and eventually walking away. Today, Ian works in real estate full time, but this conversation is about his growth journey, the cost of scaling, and what led him to exit a business he spent over a decade building. Hi, Ian. How are you today? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know we booked this a while ago, so it's finally nice to catch up and get together to do this. I've already told the audience a little bit about you before we actually hit record, but I want you to take us back to the early days of building your dry cleaning business. How did that business start? And I know it's a family-owned business and you sort of took over. Can you walk us a little bit through that journey in those early stages?
Sure, I'll rewind all the way back to 1986. My dad had an opportunity in Houston, Texas to follow a program that essentially you could buy a dry cleaning business, their business, after you learn to run it. And in 87, when the time came to make that decision, they had told him from his peers that he had met to go to Austin. And at the time, there was no discount dry cleaners in Austin, Texas. And in the late 80s, there was a massive market for dry cleaners. I think they ranked it top business to be a millionaire, become a millionaire, or one of them. And it was a way different scenario back then because people
Mm,
were dressing much more professionally. You'd have men and women lined out the door. These are things that we didn't see 20 years later, unfortunately. But he had run it over all the years. And I think, like many founders, you get burnt out. I was getting out of university in Austin, and my dad approached me. This is 2008 or 2009. And he had asked me if I'd be interested in coming in and learning the business. And by this point, he was already removed from the day to day. So I knew he had a really good, successful company, but he had, I hate to say, neglected it because he wasn't going into work anymore. And this type of role wasn't necessarily a passive hands-off ownership. Most successful dry
mm.
cleaner owners are very involved in their operation. And I gave it a shot, and I'm happy I did. This was compared to me going back to law school or business school, but I got a real life MBA starting from day
Mm.
one on what it takes to run a company. And now, 15 years later, I know that I'm confident enough to run any service-based business. I don't know too much about e-commerce and all that. I'll leave that to the smart tech world. But if it involves a service and people and boots on the ground, I'm equipped for it, and it's taught me everything I know today.
When you got into it with your dad, how many locations did he have at the time?
There were 16 at the time.
Mm,
So great
okay.
footprint, a couple of cleaning facilities, and over the course of the next couple of years, I shut down some of the low performing ones and opened up some new ones. So there's a constant, add one, remove one along the way. But that was a good size for the operation that we had, and just continue to try to make it more profitable. There was a lot of low hanging fruit, so I was able
Mm.
to go in, computerize it, get uniforms in the store, clean up our online presence, really basic stuff that is important, but we weren't doing it when I first
Mm.
got involved.
How did you decide to keep expanding instead of staying small?
You want to cover your area and be a market leader. So I was able to play off the name and the recognition that we already had in Austin and
Mm.
continued to develop that. But the market was changing, and we were at a unique point in business because we were a discounter, which in dry cleaning language just means generally it's a single price or a lower price than the average competitor. Behind the scenes, it's the same, but you make your money on volume and not by larger margins. But the game changed, and in our industry, a lot of people moved towards pickup and delivery and more of a convenience-based service, much to the likes of what Amazon and all these other companies had given us. The consumers wanted that. I tried doing it with our current setup and failed because we
Oh,
ran into a price objection. Because we had trained the customers and everybody that came to us that we are a low price dry cleaners. So quickly I realized that I had to change the name of that company. And so created a new name, priced it competitively with what the others were doing in the market. But behind the scenes, a lot of it was shared operations and never had a question about price again. At that point, we just got
oh
to
wow.
deliver good service and make a name for ourselves that way. So that's how it evolved. I paused on growing locations and expanded on under a new company name the pickup and delivery service to meet the needs of the customers at the time.
I mean, when you think about dry cleaning, you don't think about any of the things you just explained and the complexities that go beyond just having a storefront and taking orders and people picking up their stuff, right? There's so much more that goes into it. And it's a business that's actually evolved. It doesn't stay the same. Like I would assume that it did because I don't know that much about it, right?
Yeah.
So what changed for you when the business reached real scale?
I suffered from putting myself too much into every role.
Mm,
As you recall, I got in right after college, so I didn't have any business acumen. I just had work ethic. And along the way, the company needed saving. And I felt that I was the person to do it. And everything worked out fine, but it led to my burnout because I wanted to be involved in all of the decisions and every key part of the process, which for any entrepreneur that's been there, you realize you need to get out of the way. And I became the
mm,
bottleneck. So we grew and scaled and were more profitable, survived COVID. That was a big deal in our industry, in many industries, but this one in particular was hurt pretty badly. Nobody was going into work. So yeah, everything that we thought, these nice items that needed to be cleaned, people were on Zoom, and thankfully it
yeah.
all restored itself. But really, it was getting out of my own way. And as it
Mm.
evolved, I reached a ceiling to where I could really take it to the next level, or it was time to change hands. And so ultimately, when the offer came through, it was a cold email, an unsolicited offer, and just that started the conversation about maybe I
Hmm.
could exit this thing, figuring out what the company's worth. And I had decided, regardless of the money at that point, that emotionally I was ready to move on to the next thing.
I want to touch base on, we're going to get to the exit and all that stuff, but I want to touch base on one point that you've made. So you knew you were the bottleneck. It was also burning you out, I assume. Like, what happened to make you realize that in a way you were becoming the problem?
It was, I lost my drive and I had so much of it throughout the first several years. And it has to be attributed to that because I've always been a driven person. I like to work hard and I love the game of entrepreneurship.
Mm,
But when things started to not matter as much to me anymore, whether that be expenses or what we would do with new operations or the things that I used to love started to fade away. And one of the difficult things for me was going home and looking at my wife and kids and not being there. I was in front of them, right? But you're thinking about something else. And it became a point to where I thought, well, success is cool in the business world, but if you can't have it at home, then you really need to reevaluate your priorities.
mm, yeah. So you were there physically, but you weren't there mentally.
Yeah, 100%.
What part of growing to all of those locations was the most painful for you?
Honestly, it was easy to expand the footprint because that model, you don't have a centralized place where you have to clean. Well, let me take that back. As you're as you're growing and adding these locations, you don't need a centralized um, botch that again. I didn't have to put equipment in each of the stores. And so you could
Mm,
quickly go and add a new store, put up some signage, a couple computers, and continue to expand. But we had tapped out in terms for growth of being able to get more locations, I think, in the city of Austin. And there was a dry cleaner on every corner. And at some point, you start to self cannibalize. But we were able to continue to grow. We used our central facilities each time we grew and added a new store and had just delivery drivers taking them back and forth to the main operation. So it wasn't a large burden to open a new store, but you had
Mm-hmm.
to really make sure that it made sense because we also staffed really lean at these stores.
Yeah.
The industry as a whole is a very low margin business. So you can't have a lot of excess staff or fluff that's working with you or on the clock and if you're going to make it. And so that obviously was a challenge when we had labor challenges. If you were to look at a store and one person opens the store and that one individual calls in or doesn't make it to work, now you have zero at that store. So that was always a difficult thing
Mm-hmm.
because there was employees that would move on, and I think everyone struggles with this in these style businesses, but it's really
Yeah.
tough to have a team that sticks with you. And so that was the biggest challenge and the most rewarding too. All in all, there was about 95 employees at its peak and still probably around there today. But there was that revolving door of 10 or 15 people that were just coming and going and then we had our core group of 80, right? But it's so easy to forget about the great 80 and to focus on the stress of the 15, like not again. And
Yeah.
that was something that I don't miss at all. And but it's part of business, it's part of the challenge.
Yeah. What was one of the biggest lessons that you took away from that business?
I was able to apply what I learned, and I talk to entrepreneurs a lot. They're my favorite group of people to talk with because we've all gone through the same struggles. What I've found is that entrepreneurs, regardless of your business, whether you are an accountant or you own a nail salon, whatever it may be, if you remove your finished product, whatever you're selling, and you peel back the onion one layer, we all have the same challenges. You're
Mm-hmm.
facing leases, advertising, potentially HR, anything and everything that comes along with the game of business, we're all having to face together. So that's my most favorite part of being in that world and being in that sphere of people is that we
Mm-hmm.
all share the same issues and successes and failures. And I think that it puts entrepreneurs in a really good spot to be able to go and do it again in a different industry, which is much different than perhaps if you're solely focused on working in a job and you have a specialty and
Mm-hmm.
all you know is how to work your specialty and then you clock out when you go home. This is different. You can take what you've learned and you can apply it to almost anything and find success there if you could do it prior.
So you're running this business, you're pivoting, you're growing, and while you're running the business, you were also investing in real estate. Why did you start doing that?
Growing up, I had seen some of the freedom that real estate brings, and I like to study successful people. And it turns out that no matter what people do when they're successful, generally speaking, real estate becomes involved down the line, even if it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the start of it. So I had listened to a lot of podcasts way back in the day on real estate investing and how to get started. And in my early 20s, I bought my first rental property and then started doing that every year and just
Mm-hmm.
continuing while I was running the dry cleaners, all of my excess income that I didn't need for standard living expenses would go back into real estate. And so it was a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. And you fast forward 10 plus years and you see what that can bring you and the freedom that comes with it. And that's why I love real estate so much. So it was always something that I love to do. And I talked to my friends afterwards and people that know me because now all I do is real estate. But
Mm-hmm.
they thought, how did you go from being a dry
Yeah.
cleaner to that? And I'm like, you've got it wrong. I was a real estate guy all along. The dry cleaning
Mm-hmm.
business was the tool to help me get involved and to keep going. So I think everyone for real estate, and that's a common story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Money doesn't grow on trees. And so I think people have a career, they earn it in one way, and then they put their dollars to use in the best of their ability. For some, it's the stock market, and for me personally, it was real estate. And so I'm really passionate about getting people involved and them learning about some of the freedom that it brings.
Is that what led you to comfortably say, I'm ready to exit from this business because you had already started this real estate business and it's at this point, I'm going to assume that's what you were passionate about.
I always wanted for my real estate income to catch up to my business income, and it didn't. But it was enough for me when I sold, the next day I woke up and it was a surreal feeling
Mm,
I felt like I lost my identity to some degree, but I
mm,
knew that, look, I had just worked all those years to build something outside of my business, and it's still there. And that is what it brought me in like the freedom of being able to preach that message and saying, hey, always give yourself a backup plan. You never know what tomorrow brings. People in their career, they overwork themselves and they give 100% into their business.
mm-hmm,
I'll agree that there's no greater way to make money than putting all of your efforts into what you're best at. So if that's running a successful business, you should do that. But the fun can stop sometimes, especially in my scenario when I was placed myself in the middle of everything. But what's funny is you realize you're not that needed. Again, I mentioned the bottleneck earlier. You're not needed to the degree you think you are. When I sold,
oh, don't say that. I want to feel
ah,
needed.
listen, when this is a tribute to putting a good team around you and making sure you're hiring A players, but when I
That's true.
sold, I didn't know what to do. I worked so much before that, I didn't want to go into the office. I didn't want to step on the new owner's toes. And so
Yeah.
I would park down the street at a Starbucks, just waiting for them to need me. And they never needed me. And I thought, okay, I think it was a couple weeks. And then I didn't mention it to them, but at first I said, hey, I'm right down the road. But then eventually I started phasing out, going to my house and starting what this new transition would look like. But everyone always said,
Hmm.
how did you take a business of that size and 90 plus in people and your transition must have been months? I said
Hmm.
no, it was weeks, if that.
Yeah.
So power of putting a good team around you, and the team today that was with me is all still there, the key
Wow.
players. So it's amazing what can happen by setting stuff up and putting it in the hands of good people.
That's incredible. So let's talk about real estate a little bit. What was that transition like for you? Because you keep talking about, you've said it a couple times, the word freedom. It brought me freedom, freedom. What does that mean, freedom?
I know that word gets tossed around a lot, doesn't it? Listen, when when you assess what you want your life to look like, and I think this happens especially as people run into whether it's wisdom through age or something happens in their life. In my case, I had kids, I was overworked. I knew that it was self-inflicted. And
Hmm.
when I sold, I wanted to dive back in and it must have been a month or two. I was ready to go buy another company. And
Wow.
my wife told me, you got to slow down because you need to remember why you got out. And she's right. I was so addicted to that daily grind of being an entrepreneur that it only took 6 weeks, 8 weeks for me to forget that suffering and say, I'm ready to go again. And real estate was, I needed to do something in business. I was used to always going and always trying to improve myself and make something greater than it was before. And this was a really unique position I was put in because now
Hmm.
all of a sudden I was able to choose, what do I want to do? I wasn't suffering to figure out how I was going to put food on the table. And so I started investing in real estate, and it was just for myself. Honestly, it was taking what I'd earned over the years and then from the sale of the business and trying to make the safest, lowest risk use from it. I'm a very low risk person. And so the whole world of investing, A, lots of it I don't understand, and B, I don't like risk. And so for real estate, I understood it. You can touch it. It's run like a business. It has a P&L. For those reasons, it's what I gravitated towards.
Hmm.
And, if you are out of the country or don't feel like working for weeks and you have rental properties or commercial properties, whatever it may be, you're continuing to get income along the way. So
Hmm.
I really found that it aligned with what I wanted. I have three little kids, and this season of life goes quickly. So I wanted to make sure I could give my all to them and my family. and at the same time now help others. So that's how I transitioned to becoming a personal investor to then thinking, gosh, why didn't somebody come to me 10 years ago and tell me that I could do real estate passively? And that's what I focus on
Mhm.
now is getting people involved in passive real estate. Mostly it's entrepreneurs that come into our network and work with me, but it could be anybody. And it's really just getting people to know, listen, there's a way to get involved without running the day to day because I've done both and I still do both. I have the active
Mhm.
side where I'm the landlord and I'm doing all the day to day stuff, and then the passive side. And once you see that time freedom that can come from it, it's pretty amazing. Um, so I'm passionate about sharing with others that it's a good option to start growing some wealth outside of whatever you're doing for your primary thing.
So you could do it as a full-time thing, or you can do it as a little part-time thing while you're running a different business, because that's what essentially what you did.
You can, and real estate is a full-time job, so I like to
Hmm.
clarify that. And for people that are involved passively, that's what you're doing. You're allocating money in advance with intent so that somebody else can do the work for you. It's just like having staff or a team. And so there's a way to do it in real estate as well. But a lot of people hear it and think, well, it's risky, there's cycles, and I agree, there's risk in everything, but there are things out there to where you can position yourself to where it's lower returns, lower risk, but long term it's a good setup. And yeah, I love the time freedom that comes from it. Again, I
Hmm.
hate saying that because it seems cheesy. You see it online all the time, but it's so true. It's if if it's Tuesday afternoon and I think I'm done. I'm gonna go for a walk. I used to point and wonder and envy those other people that could do it. Let's say that's the work from home crowd. But but when you get to be able to actually do it and not stress about things, it's pretty eye-opening.
So if someone wanted to work with you to sort of, get the foot in the door, what is it that you do with your customers or with your clients?
I built a private network that gets people access to deals that they normally wouldn't have access to. And
Mm,
I specialize in private lending funds and mobile home parks. When people are interested in real estate as a whole, specifically passive real estate, they first get into the mailing list. I get to know them because we end up ultimately co-investing as a team. So what's unique about this, I mentioned earlier, I started off as a personal investor just from what I had built up over the years. But when I got bored of that, the whole concept was, well, what if I'm doing the exact same thing that I'm currently doing, but I'm helping others also? So that's how we do it. I underwrite every deal vigorously as if it was something that was just doing it for me because I'm doing it for me first. I'm the number one investor going into these deals. So it's a
hmm
very unique business. Whereas I'm not pointing to a menu telling people options they can pick, and sometimes that service can feel as if someone's just pointing you in the direction for the sake of it or to earn a buck.
hmm
But we do it differently to where if you have 50 grand in a deal, so do I. And there's something, or 100, so do I. There's a whole different level of commitment to what it takes to run that. And so a lot of my time, honestly, is spent vetting operators, good people, making sure that we're doing business with the right people because real estate's a people business and it does come down to who's running the show, whether or not you can be successful.
So when you got into it, you didn't really know what you were doing, just like with the other business. How do you sort of like navigate, how did you navigate like that whole space? Because it's very different from a service-based company.
Yes. Fortunately, I had the 10 plus years of experience of doing it, but to what I'm doing now, you're correct. It's quite different. You're raising money and going together as a group. And so you dive head in. And number one, I was doing it myself first as an investor in other people's groups. I won some, I lost quickly. That was an expensive education moment.
Okay.
And fortunately, that allowed me to figure out this was before I had started the business. How can I do this to where that doesn't happen again?
Mm-hmm.
And, in the world of investing, especially private investing in real estate, there are bad actors out there. And so I mentioned before, so much of my job is figuring out is this person someone that we'd want to work with? Are they friendly? You're essentially a partner. You're going to communicate with them for the
Hmm.
life of this deal. Do you want to sit on a plane with them for 5 hours? Could you chat? Could it be a normal conversation? Are they a prick? Are they arrogant? Okay, then no, we don't want to do it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So background checks, flying out to these properties. So there's a lot that goes into it, but make no mistake, it is a very active business. It's just the people that are choosing for it to be passive. They're putting their hard-earned money and they have the right to be the passive investor and not have to spend their time doing the day-to-day headaches.
We're coming up on time and it flew by. But before we wrap up, I just want to ask, like, looking back, what do you think founders misunderstand about growth and success?
I think the definition of growth and success changes over time. Our head is in the sand when we first start, and it's survival mode, and we all get there. And I think as you unlock each level, you begin to see that the definition of success changes. So whether it's money or the number of sales or customers you may have, my advice to anybody is to take a look in the mirror sometime and slow down and figure out, is this the path you really want to go? Because at the end of the day, if you work your whole life putting your blood, sweat, and tears into your business, but you neglect the good stuff in life, then you'll look back and regret it. So it's
Mm,
finding that balance. That's the biggest challenge, is finding that balance between what makes you happy and that personal drive. Because a lot of people say, I'm doing this for my family or for my kids. I think I was that person also, but I was wrong because, yeah, that's a byproduct of what you're doing, but you're really doing it for you first. Obviously, you have to have that drive and ambition to get there. And without you wanting it, it won't come. And
hmm.
so do the things that make you happy and how you have defined success for yourself. And hopefully it then translates to, giving good to your family or your community, whatever you want to focus on later in life.
Everyone just assumes success equals happiness. But based on what you're saying, just because someone is being successful doesn't mean that their life is fulfilled, that they're happy. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, I've met a lot of miserable rich people. So you can see it. It's a common trait amongst founders too, that they give everything to their work and their career, and they end up self-sabotaging their family and whatever else is important to them. And so it seems that the solution for that is to bring your family in and work with them if you're that passionate about what you're doing. But yes, money is important. I think it's a necessary pillar of life. People should talk about it more often too. Often it's a
Hmm.
taboo subject to speak about amongst peers and friends, but it's a really healthy conversation to have. And you'll figure out very quickly there's a difference between talking about it and somebody either bragging about it or, about how much money they have. It, like entrepreneurship, money and investing is a game as well, and you want to play it well. So it's important
Hmm.
that you talk about it. It would just be like if you go to a trade show in your industry, you're there so you can better yourself and your understanding on how to make things work and how to be the best you can. So money and investing work the same way. But yeah, money doesn't buy happiness.
You're successful, but you're not happy, and everyone perceives that you are happy. Is that how you knew that you were ready to exit from the company, or that you had reached burnout because you were successful, there was revenue coming in, but you weren't happy? Is that what led to that exit, or to you not feeling fulfilled?
The level of happiness for what I was doing definitely declined. What was unique about this was it was a family business and there was a legacy component to it that I wanted to
Hmm.
preserve. And I felt that it wasn't in the best interest of that business and, the legacy. And to be honest, the legacy is all from within, right? Is at the end of the
Yeah.
day, for the customers, it's just a shop that cleans their clothes, but it means much more to the people that are involved in it. You spend most of your life at work. And I knew that I owed it to the team to be able to give them that and to, check out when the time's right. It's like people have this in their personal relationships. When that light switch is turned off, it's hard to turn it back on and
Hmm.
dive back in with the same degree of passion or ambition that you once had. So I knew that time had come, but all in all, it's knowing when to step away, knowing when it's time to try something new, because life's short and we only get one, we only get
Yeah,
one of them. So you
that's
always
true.
constantly reevaluate what you're doing.
But that is an indicator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Ian, thank you so much for joining me. This was very educational. I loved understanding and learning about like your journey from one business to another and everything that you learned in between. That was really great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
I want to thank Ian for joining me today. What I keep coming back to is this: growth is easy to celebrate, but rarely examined. And that's how leaders wake up inside businesses that no longer fit who they've become. If you're building now, take a clear look at whether the growth you're pursuing is supporting the life you actually want or quietly pulling you from it. And that's a wrap. Thank you for joining me on this journey of learning and growth. If this episode resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share it with someone who's building through a challenge right now. You can also connect with us on social media and be part of a community that believes resilience is the real advantage. Remember, growth isn't linear, success isn't guaranteed, and setbacks are part of the process. What matters is how you execute. This is Sonia signing off, but as always, keep chasing your dreams with tenacity.